have you seen Hellier yet? That program?
No, I've seen it. I've seen it advertised, and I've seen a couple of people mention it on Facebook. It's something that I've got so much going on watching that I've put it in the queue, so to speak. So no, I haven't yet.
No, I'm a bit stuck on Treadstone at the moment, so I'm still watching Treadstone. But no, over Christmas, my wife and I we binge watched Hellier season 1 and season 2. I actually didn't realise it's on YouTube as well, so you don't have to have an Amazon account. It is actually on YouTube. But basically, Hellier is about some American paranormal investigators. It's interesting because in a way it's a bit psychic questing. It's kind of mediumship psychic questing. But then there's a number of issues with it. But I think it's very relatable to what we wanted to talk about today, because what we wanted to talk about is how we can often misunderstand general mental connotations and believe them to be mediumship or psychic or something like that. You know, we kind of think that sensory perceptions are actually some spirituality. So in this Hellier, what happens is it starts off as kind of a normal sort of paranormal investigation. And the things they kind of have is they start to seem to have this synchronicity, which is a key word that they string along throughout the whole series. Now, don't forget, I'm a medium, Ian's a medium, and I'm quite skeptical towards Hellier, which I shouldn't really be, because it is actually a great piece of TV. I just think there's a great discussion to be had about kind of the investigation and research. From an investigative and research point of view, they miss a load of stuff, which is crazy. But what I want to concentrate on is how they try to connect the dots, basically. Something happens in one area or something happens and they automatically try to connect it. So that's called apophenia, which you know about as well, don't you?
I do, yes. Apophenia and pareidolia, they sort of go hand in hand of how the brain sort of brings over and interprets visual information into the visual cortex.
Yeah, well, with apophenia, I suppose, is how we interpret our surroundings. So how it works with apophenia is we can break that down. Is basically what we start to see is a series of, like, say, connections or a series of incidents. So we might, let's say we hear some random knocking on the door. We look outside, we don't see anyone. And then we think, oh, that's a bit strange. And then something else happens. Let's say a cup falls down or something else, something that may be just completely unrelated. But then we start to say, oh, actually, maybe these are related. Maybe these are tied together. Maybe there's some sort of synchronicity, as the Hellier team believe, that one paranormal incident or alleged paranormal incident is actually connected to another. So apophenia is not just experiencing the paranormal, but it's experienced things like gambling. Is people start, you've all heard of, kind of how luck is, or in sport as well, is how luck is very, very connected with sport. Certain footballers, before they come on to the pitch, will actually touch their boots or knock them together, or they might carry the ball, or they have to be in a particular position. And this is because they have an apophenia, that they believe that there's a connection. When the first time they ever went on the football field and they were successful, it was also the same time tap the boots 3 times or something like that.
Yeah.
And this runs through in Hellier, is that you've got this sort of feeling of them, they're connecting all these dots and they tie it together. And instead of saying, actually, do you think we're just being a bit sort of paranoid? Well, actually, no, it's apophenia. You're over-interpreting, and it's not hallucinations, but they're over-interpreting kind of a situation. And this happens in mediumship as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. There's mediumship. There's a lot of information. People seem to think it's just having feelings or just hearing words or seeing, but it's multiple of. My guide William often mentioned it as a thought bubble that is conveyed from the spirit side into the brain of the medium.
What was that?
No, that is Millie. She's on one, I think.
Oh, yeah, right, okay.
Yeah, sorry, Martin.
It sounded like Millie Cat was going bungee jumping or something.
She's running around. It's basically, when you're a kid, when you're on the telephone, you have a kid saying, "Can I have an ice cream? Can I have a sweet?"
Right, is she? Yeah.
She isn't asking for an ice cream, man, just being a prat. When you look at the topic, there's multiple sort of thoughts coming in or thoughts are coming that contain visual auditory and sensory information, and your brain is trying to think, hang on a minute, what's this, what's that, what's this, and trying to make sense with it on what your brain already knows and past experiences and such, and makes reason it. And that's why some mediums, when they're talking, they will just stop talking, they will listen, and then they have to process, and then they talk again. So that's why you get mediums going quiet when they're giving a message. It's gathering the information, making sense, and then saying it. So there is a hell of a lot going on.
So, okay, well, let's say with the case of apophenia, how as mediums can we kind of not get ourselves snowballed into believing that somehow everything that we are experiencing is connected? How can we kind of take ourselves out of it? And I suppose that is actually the solution, is we do have to we have to overall look at what's happening. And I think also as well is interesting that you used to do reports for all the ghost hunts.
I did, yeah.
You used to do the reports for your ghost hunts. And that allowed you to step back and actually see a greater connection, but from a statistical point of view, which I think is far better than relying on the human brain in some way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's apophenia, is that we obviously mistake what's happening and how connections. I mean, in Hellier, there is this session where they're using the spirit box. Don't ask Ian, because I mean, obviously, we're not big fans of spirit box.
Definitely not. I can't stand them.
So they're using the spirit box in the middle of the woods, and apparently there's a word, tin can. Okay. Now, at the time, you're kind of thinking, right, okay. And apparently this guy saw this vision of a tin can. Okay. They then decide to go to this haunted cave, but then actually they don't go to a haunted cave. They go to this old railway entrance, and they must only be about 20 or 30 foot in the entrance. They're that scared. Well, I mean, I'm presuming, because there's no explanation why they don't actually go further into the cave, but they stood outside, and the first thing that they see when they go into the cave is there's a tin can on the floor.
Yeah.
So
placement.
Well, it's either two things. It's either placement, or there's naturally a tin can there, because if people have camped there, some people, especially the younger generation, unfortunately, and some of the older generation, they will leave rubbish behind. I should imagine the amount of people who've cooked a can of beans on a campfire. It's quite a lot of people who've done that. So there's bound to be tin cans left behind. But actually, they then work this into the story that this tin can is obviously a sign from spirit, or a sign from a spirit, or it could actually be a manifestation of a shape-shifting alien. Now, the thing is, I really believe in very, very weird stuff, but even for me to believe that this tin can, which actually reappears in season 2, because they go back to the place and it's still there. So to me, that kind of rules out that. I mean, it must be a really boring job if you're a shape-shifting alien and you decide to become a tin can, and then you stay there for 18 months waiting for the team to come back. But yeah, I mean, it's that thing, isn't it? We have to be, certainly as a medium, we do have a responsibility, and we do have to say to ourselves that these are probably not connected, or if they are connected, we then need to rely more on our spirit guide and ask our spirit guide more about a particular situation, so we understand what's actually happening, rather than believing it to be synchronicity, which is going to be a big keyword over this next year, I feel, certainly because of the Hellier use of the term, when actually a lot of this could easily be described as a series of unconnected events that are only connected by the theories of one, a particular group or one person. It's kind of an ongoing narrative. Now, pareidolia. I can never say that word. Now, I'm going to let you explain what that is.
Okay. Pareidolia is processing random information. It is visual, and basically the way that the brain works is that the light hits through to the retina of the back of the eye, changed into electrical stimulus, sent over to the higher cortical functioning via the thalamus, which is very much just above the brainstem at the back of the head. And what happens is when we are looking around a building, we're looking where we're going, or even on a normal basis, the eye is constantly moving. Obviously, that old adage, you can't see your eyes move when you're looking in your mirror, but the thing is is that your eyes are moving constantly, approximately around 3 times per second. So when you're reading, everything is a little bit slowed because you're focusing on an area. Now, when you see patterns, then your brain tries to sort of match them up with what is already in your sort of iconic memory. And it sort of comes over into a sense like, you might see a stain on your wall, as happens in old buildings, and straight away your brain is trying to make sense of it. Is it a threat going back to cave times, your caveman times? And then you will start to see your face, because that's what your brain's looking for. And then before you know it, you've got a whole figure there that is replicated. That is what it must be. If it's the face of a person, there must be a body of a person. So your brain is looking for where that is, and it matches up through things you've already seen. Natural day, everyday objects. Let's say, for instance, you have your mop is sticking out of it. It's got a rag on the top. It's leaning close to your door. There's a light switch with a very large cable coming down from the ceiling. And before you are thinking that cloth, because bear in mind it's dark. In the dark, you lose a lot of detail because obviously there is with the light, it forms on the photoreceptors of the brain, red or green, blue, and we can get a sense of depth, a sense of loads of sense of details that lost a little bit in night, because we are looking at rods rather than cones. Cones at daylight, rods at night time, so we don't get that much detail. So the brain has got to work harder to try to make, oh yes, that is so and so, and make a semblance. So you automatically see or you can, should I say, see a sort of a cloth on top of a broom head, on top of a mop, and you think, oh, that is somebody's hair. Next thing you know, it's all put over to a black monk, or there's a hag in the corner.
I think also, Ian, I think another thing is interesting that you mentioned about the rods of the eyes and that sort of thing, because certainly one thing that we experience many times on a ghost hunt or whatever is people will walk past an open door, and if there's something in there, let's say mannequin or poster on the wall, they are looking forward, but the rods on the outer side pick up that there is a shadowy figure, or there's or even just something like a poster, and the movement of in the rods seems to indicate that there's actually movement in that room, when actually there's no movement at all. It's just you're walking forward. So pareidolia, which I can never say, can be in its basic form, in where, and we used to joke about, I see faces in carpets. So you see faces or shapes in clouds, or you see faces in bushes. Now that's important about the faces in bushes, because this is the whole reason why the brain has to interpret random images and things like that, because when we was cave people, they had to be permanently aware that any time they were going to be eaten by saber-toothed tiger, panther, or whatever. So if they looked into a bush and they could see the face of animal or another tribe or whatever, we needed to make that decision quick. And that's where, as Ian said, it taps into your inner archetypes, really. And suddenly you are aware of a threat in front of you. So this is it's doing its job. Unfortunately, what a lot of people tend to do is they misinterpret this as being some sort of paranormal experience. So things like orbs, I mean, I'm going to talk about orbs. I'm not going to talk about what they are, but people used to look at orb photographs and say, I can see a face in it. Well, you couldn't see a face in it. What actually you're doing is looking at this random image, and you're believing that there is a face in it, because your inner archetype is actually saying, this could be a potential threat because there's a face. Is it a happy face? Is it a sad face? Is it an angry? Is it going to attack you? Is it going to eat you? And that's what your brain's going through whenever you see stuff like this. A lot of the paranormal photographs that we ever had sent in to us, or that I've ever investigated or seen, I would say almost 98% were seen by the person who took the photograph, didn't see it at the time. When they looked at the photograph on a computer, or when they used to have a physical photograph in the olden days, 20 years ago, then they would see something they interpreted as being a face, a body, or some sort of being. And again, it's our brain creating patterns or trying to interpret a pattern as some threat or something that it can relate to. It's a very, very natural point of view. And this happens in mediumship. And how it happens in mediumship is sometimes in circumstances like ghost hunting, a medium will go along with another person's experience that, oh, I can see a face over there. The medium might be sensing an energy in that area and say, oh, I can sense it and feel it. They are sensing and feeling it, but it's not the face what they're seeing. It's not the face. It's about using your sensibilities. And we've said this time again. We say it in our course, and we first started the podcast, we talked about what is not a ghost. And certainly with pareidolia, the amount of imagery and things that Ian and I see that get sent to us through Facebook, we get tagged in on Facebook or Instagram. I don't think I've ever seen anything conclusive. I don't know about you.
No, definitely not. Can always be put over to, people say, oh, there wasn't anybody smoking, but it's cold in this person's breath. And there's, light anomalies normally caused by the camera itself. And people want to believe, seeing is believing. And I do feel a lot of it, but there must be, because they've been told it's haunted, so therefore I must have caught the ghost, whatever, on camera.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the paranormal is difficult. You have to really, in all circumstances, whether you are an investigator or whether you're a medium, you do have to step back.
Yeah.
It's same with the information that you can get. And I've done psychic quests in the past where we've been led to particular places from the information that spirit has given us. It's interesting that when I've reviewed it, 2-3 years later down the line, I then realized that actually half the time the spirit wasn't talking about a physical place, or it was describing something that was happening as a bigger picture.
Yeah.
We did an investigation of Painswick in Gloucestershire, and we was given information from a spirit, Woodchester Mansion, and they were telling us about a temple that exists in Painswick, and we've never heard of it. I'm from Yorkshire, so there's a temple. It was created for nobility to come together, and it was dedicated to the spirits of the woods around Painswick. And I'm thinking, this is absolutely nonsense. I've never heard of this. This is sort of very early internet days. There was nothing on the internet. We couldn't find anything. They told us to go to Painswick and we would find it on this particular bend of a road. Didn't think anything of it. Thought, well, this is a bit strange. I went into the library. I tried to look for Painswick ghosts. I tried to look for Painswick. So I thought, I'll have a look for Painswick temple. Maybe that. And there was a temple. And so it said it was at this whole area, at this hall in Painswick. So we drove down there, went there. And guess what? Where it was on the land, we weren't allowed on the land, unfortunately. But where it was on the land, it was on the bend exactly where the spirit told us at Woodchester Mansion. So spirit was right about that. But it was interesting. There was loads of other things that drove us to that. But I also realized that during that term, there was a lot of other leads that kind of sprung off of that weren't correlated at all. We were told to go to a particular churchyard or graveyard, and we would see some further evidence of this temple and a spirit we met there who called himself the Woodsman. That he was a local man who worked in the woods, and it wasn't actually anything to do with the temple. We realized, sort of 2-3 years down the line, that actually I would say about only 70% was actually connect to the temple and what the spirit wanted to see.
Yeah.
And 30% was just bump. It was apophenia. It was us kind of thinking, oh my God, this has happened. But when you stripped it back, actually, there was a small amount of, something was actually related to the spirit. And then there's always this noise. And I think that's a lot with mediumship. If you're doing mediumship, investigative mediumship, or sometimes you do get what I like to call noise, really, is that there is some information that doesn't hit. And that doesn't mean that you are an inaccurate medium or I'm an inaccurate medium. I think it's just times when we let human brain into it.
No, definitely so.
I think that's the problem when we've talked about interpretation as well, isn't it? When we've talked about when you're reading tarot cards, is that sometimes, and this is the problem, is sometimes you give a reading, and if you do not keep a tight focus on that and really, kind of focus on your psychic mediumship, if you divulge from that, that's where you end up in trouble, because sometimes you don't realize you've actually slipped into, oh, hang on a minute, I'm kind of saying things here that don't probably connect, and they'll say, oh, I don't understand that, and you'll say, oh, hang on a minute, I need to just reconnect here.
Yeah.
And it's just your brain just interpreting what you've just experienced, and you kind of go off track. I mean, that happens to everybody, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I mean, it's within mediumship, you have to bear in mind your own personality, your sort of viewpoint as you're growing up. What you learn from your parents, your siblings, your kids at school, the people you work with. So your mediumship will always be clouded to a certain extent by who you are, and that is evident in some mediums might focus on monks or dark entities, and some don't. It's their sort of makeup, I do feel, which can influence the mediumship being given by spirit. So yes, there is that. The trance mediumship, which is basically you going into a deeper state of relaxation and allowing spirit to sort of have more influence over your thought patterns, tend to come forward where the information is more direct without your own thoughts and judgments clouding the original message.
It's almost like free form information coming straight through, and trance that you've seen on television with people walking around kind of strangling each, or investigators who've done that and said, oh, I'm in trance, and they're walking around almost zombie like with their eyes closed, hitting people and all that. That's not trance mediumship. The trance mediumship that I remember from 20, 30 years ago was nothing like that. It was very quiet in a room. Sometimes, we sometimes had transfiguration as well, where the face seemingly changes as well. And then obviously there's this information from spirit and flows all the way through. There's no sort of interpretation. It just comes directly from spirit.
Yes.
And again, I think it's almost like and you can put me right on this actually, but to me, with trance, it definitely feels like almost like a meditative state, in that the information comes through and it's very pure and very strong when the medium is fully linked and fully at a particular state, brain cycle stage. And then sometimes, especially near the end, when you can see that there is something happening, and often what will happen is the medium's voice will change, and I've experienced this with you, and this has been just randomly talking. I know when Williams kind of cut in, because suddenly your whole voice construct has changed. How you structure a particular sentence changes. And I've noticed that with trance medium is sometimes near the end, when they're getting tired, or kind of their focus is lost, they'll often come back, and it'll be a slow sort of process where you're getting a bit of information from both the medium and also spirit as well.
Yeah, I mean, trance is nice if you want to push into it, and maybe we can do a podcast in the future, or write an article or something and put it on the Essential 2 page. I just get, really, when you're looking at trance, there is the voice change, there's definitely a diction change, and it comes over with the topic. And when you think back into even, sort of the period between the First and Second World War and going over towards the latter part of Queen Vic period, then often than not, the mediumship given over through trance was well and truly above the level of education of the person, and without knowledge. You might have a young lady talking about, engineering aspects or something, which at that time was deemed to be a man's area. It's just to do with men, so women weren't taught it. So I'm not being sexist, okay, ladies. So it sort of puts over into a sense at times the trance, the information given via trance is because it is outside the realm of understanding of that medium.
I think that's a really interesting point as well, Ian, what you're saying there, because when you look at Kardec and kind of that movie where it was talking about the two sisters writing the book, and yet they were writing of it was a philosopher, wasn't it, who died however many years ago. They were writing in his exact style, which was absolutely in his handwriting. So we just wanted to chat, really, just that a lot of people are talking about synchronicity and kind of connections and that sort of thing, and we just wanted to say really that as mediums we need to kind of see the bigger picture. We need to be more kind of aware of what could be happening, and that it's not as simple as black and white, certainly with mediumship. It's about interpreting, it's about understanding, keeping good records, as Ian's highlighted, it's about stepping back and seeing what's happening and not just trying to string a whole load of connections together and hoping that it all means one big great thing. But as I say, I think certainly if you're listening to this, it's worth you checking out Hellier. I think the first couple of episodes are really interesting, and it's only let down by sort of poor investigation in a way, that there's lost leads, and the second series really lets itself down as they go very similar, like Most Haunted, into the occult or alleged occult, and that's basically seems like on a whim. But I mean, we've seen that countless times, how paranormal groups, after a while, suddenly start thinking that they need to dabble in paganism, Wiccan, and it seems like a progression that I keep seeing. I need to write an article on this, actually. The amount of people.
It'd be good of you to do that, actually, Martin.
It's interesting where people take their paranormal investigations, which is, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just saying it seems to show a lack of focus, that somehow it has to go somewhere, that somehow your paranormal investigations have to somehow progress into another area. Well, it's a shame that they don't go into nuclear physicists, not nuclear, quantum physics. That, I don't see people rushing into that. That suddenly, that would actually be the more natural aspect to go into, wouldn't it? Really?
Yeah. I think certainly since doing my science degree with the Open University, I've come to appreciate the science a lot more in mediumship, and looking at how the scientific can help the apophenia, and coming over as well as the the pareidolia, and taking a step back, reasoning it. If you focus too much, then you blind everything else, and you're just seeing what you were wanting to see, and you're reinforcing things. So taking a step back or analysing it isn't sort of saying it's rubbish. Because I think it's in the words of Spock would be better. If you rule out everything, whatever you're left with, however seemingly impossible, has to be the answer. So I feel that is what you need to do, is to rule out everything, and therefore whatever's left has to be right. Whether it's, oh my God, it's a ghost and we run, So I think it needs to be looked at in that sort of thing, and science needs to be with mediumship.
So anyway, this has been Mediums in Action, general, sort of chewing the fat and having a good think about mediumship as a whole, and kind of, if there's an area that you would like to cover, if you want us to talk about a particular aspect of mediumship or psychic ability, or even a particular news story, then please do drop us an email or visit our Facebook page, Ascend Tier 2. That's all you need to type, Facebook, and we're there. And thank you very much, everybody, for your support, and keep safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you very much, Lee. Bye.